Hi everyone and welcome back to this month's Sofa Sessions. I'm Sam and I'm joined again by my colleague Calum, and recently we hosted a webinar on the duty to prevent sexual harassment in the workplace and how that's changing. It was really well attended, we got some great feedback, and so we wanted to use this session to pick out a couple of key points, highlights, and really some takeaways for you to be thinking about. If you haven't had a chance to watch the webinar or you weren't able to join, it is in full on our YouTube channel now. So we'd recommend, if you want the deeper dive, to go and look at the webinar on our YouTube channel. So please do that. So Callum, for anyone who is completely new to this, what's changing in October 2026?
So I think the key takeaway is that the legal bar is being raised. We're seeing a shift from taking reasonable steps to prevent harassment to all reasonable steps having to be taken to prevent harassment.
And why is that adding of the word all, I suppose, so important?
I think it fundamentally changes what the legal test is. I mean, it is such a small, insignificant thing. I mean, it's a three-letter word. But we see a shift then from looking at, well, what have you done and is that reasonable, to what could you have done to prevent sexual harassment, to stop those things having occurred in the first place?
And I suppose the core question would be, how is this different to what HR teams are already doing now?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it mainly comes from the fact that currently we have training policies. Most organisations have already kind of ticked those boxes. And I use that phrase deliberately because there is an element of it kind of being a bit of a tick box exercise just now, where you've got your policy, you've got your training that you do on the first day of your employment, and then maybe once a year, potentially at best.
Yeah.
But actually, what businesses now need to be looking at is having something that actually works in practice and can be demonstrably shown to work in practice as well. So it's not just, do we have this policy? It's a question of, is it effective and can we prove that it's effective?
So I suppose, what does all reasonable steps look like day to day?
Yeah, it's a good question, but it's a difficult one to, I guess, give a specific answer to. I mean, it's going to be tailored business to business, obviously, but I think it's really looking at being a lot more proactive about how you manage the risks and how you manage sexual harassment generally. It's all fine and well to have an area of the business that we risk assess and we think, okay, that's a low risk area. We're probably not going to see many instances of sexual harassment. But if we do find that actually there are complaints in this area or we are seeing issues, it's then, for one, reacting to that in the sense of, okay, we need to do something about that, but then proactively managing that going forward and seeing how we can reduce that risk.
So it's, I suppose, what we're not saying is that policies, training, some of this stuff, it doesn't matter anymore, but it's perhaps not enough anymore.
Exactly. I mean, the problem obviously with all reasonable steps is, I mean, it's very ambiguous. Quite unhelpfully, there are regulations built into the legislation to set out what all reasonable steps might look like. But what we're seeing is that actually we're not going to see that until 2027. So we're going to have a duty for a year that we don't have a lot of clarification on what it is. That is very, very broad by nature. Yeah.
And I suppose, do we know, we don't quite know exactly what we're talking about. Do we know how tough tribunals will be about this kind of thing?
I mean, we don't, and we don't know until we actually see, cases coming through with the new legislation in place. But I think if we give regard to the way that tribunals look at harassment, even now with the reasonable steps defence, I think there is going to be a real look at, have you identified the risks? What steps have you taken? Where might there be kind of gaps on things? And also, how do we address it? I mean, it's a move, I guess, because at the moment, taking reasonable steps to prevent harassment is a defence in the employment tribunal. That's the basis on which we defend harassment claims. Now, by making it this proactive duty, it's going to be under much more scrutiny, and it's going to be, under a microscope as to what have you done, how have you checked what you've done is effective.
Yeah, and what are, I suppose, some of the consequences for getting that wrong in tribunal, which obviously is particularly relevant for employers.
Yeah. And I mean, we've already got sexual harassment legislation. We have sort of injuries to feelings, mental bans, all that kinds of stuff. But what we are going to see is the potential for a 25% uplift if an employer's found to not have taken all reasonable steps. And I guess in the same way we see with disciplinary and grievance procedures, ACAS codes, the same kind of thing. We're going to see that potential for an uplift.
So it's financial and reputational as well as ever with this kind of thing. So
Exactly.
what should HR be thinking about and looking at now before this duty comes in?
I think it's really about, I guess, getting your ducks in a row more than before. Again, I think if you don't have a training kind of policy set up, that's your first port of call. And obviously that's the kind of thing that we expect to have now. But I suppose more than that, it is looking at things like, can we do some risk assessments on areas of the business? Identifying the kind of interactions and places and looking at, I suppose, culture from the top down to see, okay, where are there areas that these issues could arise? And really, I think it is about being able to look at your business sort of inwardly and say, okay, if I was going to an employment tribunal tomorrow, could I justify the way in which we deal with sexual harassment or prevent sexual harassment?
Yeah, I think that's really useful. And obviously we delve into a lot more detail on this in the webinar, but what would you say would be the key takeaways from just this very short snippet in this session?
I think it is proactivity. It's being practical and getting ahead of the changes that are coming. Looking at training managers on how to deal with harassment, how to deal with these issues if they arise, making sure that your culture is one where people feel safe to come forward with issues. And obviously that can be easier said than done, but it's really looking at, again, that outward perspective. What is your business doing? What more could it be doing? And if you think these are the things that we could be doing, why aren't we doing them?
Yeah, let's get them done. That's really useful. Thank you very much for that, Calum. And as we said, the webinar on this that we've done recently is on our YouTube channel in full, where we delve into this topic in a lot more detail. It's, I'm afraid to say, another area of change and development for employment law and HR to be thinking about in the next few months. So thanks very much for joining for us this session, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks, goodbye.